Hi everybody. My name's Hugh Kimber. I'm joined by Dan Rainford from Lloyds. Today, as it says, we're going to be talking about building the foundations for a successful optimisation strategy. Just to do some proper introductions, I've been at Webtrends for 12 years, historically doing financial services as a territory at Webtrends. About 3 years ago, we launched our Optimise platform in Europe, and I took on the responsibility for that launch. So that's why I'm here today with Dan. And Dan?
Thank you. So my name's Dan Rainford. I work for the Lloyds Banking Group. I've worked for the company for 12, coming up to 13 years, in a number of different divisions. Started off in IT, moved through to retail, where I worked in online banking, and now work in general insurance, where I look after the e-commerce side of things for our home insurance applications.
So I'm not going to talk about who Webtrends are. If you want to know more about us as a company, we're on stand E20 and we're welcome to come and have a chat afterwards. I'm just going to do a bit of an introduction just to set the scene, and I'm going to pass over to Dan, who's going to talk about his experiences. The first thing we think about building a successful strategy, why should we test? We all need to be able to answer this question. Why is it important to test and why should we be doing it? Let's just say hypothetically, your CFO comes to you and says, I've got an extra £100,000 for you to spend this year. What are you going to do with it? One, you could maybe pass it to your email provider, send another 50,000 emails. Maybe push it towards paid search. We know based on previous investments for paid search that we've generated X% ROI from the last £100,000 we spend. But what if there's an investment you could make that optimised all of those different acquisition channels? Rather than choosing one or two to invest that £100,000 in, or whatever the figure may be, you use an optimisation best practice in order to improve conversions across all those different areas. So, why is that important? We think about all these different demand channels to invest in, and there's a direct correlation between how successful your campaigns are and how engaging your website is. Now, the concept of testing and optimization has been around for years. Email vendors have tested subject lines, images, copy. It's standard practice. But you can test as much as you want in email. You can optimize your SEO and PPC as much as you want. But if your website's not engaging enough, as I'm here with Dan, let's say you've got a mortgage application process and it's too complicated or it's not easy enough to follow, that investment's not reaching its full potential, and that's very much where optimization comes in. So what are the top benefits then of optimization and testing? This is from the Forrester Wave from the previous year. I found the top three quite interesting. Increased conversion, increased landing page conversion, and increased form completion. So what does that say to me? That says it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it doesn't matter what your site type is, if you've got a specific set of calls to action, if you've got something you want a consumer to do on your site, optimization can help. I think irrelevant of whether you're a retailer, or a travel company, or you're in financial services, increased conversion, increased landing page conversion is something we could all benefit from. But the same report talked about what are the challenges in terms of optimization. Just to pick out a few that I found interesting on this as well. Modifying web pages for testing, or even lack of corporate buy-in or secure funding for testing initiatives. Basically, what this basically means is if you've got a lack of corporate buy-in, there's no foundation to the optimization process. We're talking about building a foundation. You need to create a culture. And if there's lack of corporate buy-in and a lack of understanding of the power of optimization, it tends to get pushed to the bottom of the pile and deprioritized. So, first things first then, if I'm going to start building a successful program, what do I need to do? Well, first thing is you need a resource, and this might sound obvious, but we have engaged with a lot of companies that haven't really dedicated or assigned someone to own this as a program for the business. Something Lloyds have done very well, and Dan can talk about how his day works when he goes through his piece, but it's not a full-time job, optimization, but Dan is a named person. He's responsible for the program to the business, he reports back to the business, and he owns this for the organisation. So once you've then got your resource, the question comes up, where do I start? Well, Webtrends as a company, you may be familiar with the brand, some of you have been here for a while. Analytics, we've been doing this for 20 years. So understanding visitor behaviour, understanding what people do on your site, that's our bread and butter. We've done that for the last 20, 25 years. Once you've identified an area of opportunity, let's say in your mortgage home application process, you've got 12 steps to the funnel. We know that step 3 is where we're losing 90% of our visitors. Well, we've got two options. One, you can redesign that page based on gut feel. Hopefully you get it right. You might get it right, you might get it wrong. Or two, you can engage in some sort of optimization best practice, whether that be at a basic level an A/B test if you're trying a radical redesign, or even tweaks with multivariate testing, or potentially identifying new visitors versus returning, or seeing how mobile users engage differently to desktop users. So now we know what the the challenges are, we know what the benefits are, we've got our resource aligned, we've identified our first areas of opportunity. To then start to sort of build that culture, you need momentum. So in order to build momentum, you need to get results, and in order to get the results, you need to run tests. And once you've got them, you need to share them around the business. It's something Dan does very well. In the early days when we started working with Lloyds, optimization wasn't necessarily something that was considered a channel to invest in, much like paid search or email. But as time's gone on, Dan's used the results of the tests that he's run and used that to evangelize around the business. And he started to lay some really solid foundations over the last 2 years for what has become a very successful optimization program. Now, how he's done that, if you think back to the very beginning, I talked about all the different acquisition channels that you could invest in, so email, paid search, social, mobile, etc. What that basically means is stakeholders. So if you've got stakeholders in the business that are interested and have a vested interest in the success of conversion, go to them, ask them for ideas. Something Dan does again very well, has a little template where he emails it out, people screenshot on a page they think they want to test, jot down 2 or 3 ideas and include them in that optimization program. 2 things will happen then. One, they've got a vested interest in seeing their campaigns improve. So everyone wants to see their conversions improve, so they're going to want to understand what the results were. And 2, there's an element of arrogance. We all want to think that the test ideas we came up with are the ones that generated the highest conversions. So you've got a series of people within the business in these different pockets or different groups that have a vested interest in the optimization program. So once you've done that, you've then created the culture. Once you've got the culture, you've got a very solid foundation to build on, which is exactly what Dan's going to talk about today. So that rather long-winded intro over, I'm going to pass over to Dan to talk about how he's put this into practice.
Thank you. So as Hugh said, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the business challenges we've had within Lloyds Banking Group, and some of the reasons behind those, and then what led us to working with Webtrends, in particular with Optimise, and how that's actually helped us overcome those challenges, and really taking it forwards over the last couple of years and what we're going to plan to do in coming years. So I'll talk a bit about that briefly, and then I'm going to talk about, or go through 6 example tests that we've run over the last couple of years, and just talk to you a bit about what we saw in those tests. So, it's probably not completely relevant to everyone here, but we're Lloyds Banking Group. We formed as a result of a number of mergers and acquisitions over the last few years. I'm from the HBOS side, the Halifax side originally. We sell not only insurance, we're a retail bank obviously, and we're involved in a number of other parts of that industry. I am from the insurance division, and that's what I'm really going to talk about today, is primarily what we've done in insurance and home insurance. So we sell motor, we sell travel, pet, health, everything else, but I'm going to really talk about home insurance primarily. So we're quoted on both the London and the New York Stock Exchange. We've got more than 25 million customers in the UK and something in the region of 115,000 staff at last count. We've got a number of other brands. I've popped 3 on there, which are our sort of 3 leading brands. There are others, such as Scottish Widows, Cheltenham Gloucester, and other bits and pieces, but we primarily sell home insurance from these 3, the Lloyds, Halifax and Bank of Scotland brands. So, as an insurance division, we are now spread across the country. We are based primarily in West Yorkshire, in Leeds. We've got a base in Bournemouth and one in South Wales as well, in Cardiff. The other little blue dot there is Bristol, which we've also got a reasonably large base there. As I said a minute ago, we sell insurance from our Lloyds, Halifax and Bank of Scotland brands. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges with conversion and some of the business problems that we had, which led us to working with Webtrends. I've put 3 titles up on here. We've got agility, resource constraints, and what's the optimal. And these are probably some of the 3 issues that we were facing into. And the top 2, so agility and resource constraints, are rather they're similar. They're very, very similar. So agility-wise, we're reasonably good, or we like to think we're reasonably good. We've got somewhere in the region of maybe 4 to 8 releases over the course of a year, which allows us to put changes into the websites. But with those 4 to 8 releases come a limited number of slots to make a change. So for argument's sake, we have 4 releases this year. We might only get 10 changes away in those 4 releases. So resource constraints has probably been one of the biggest issues we've had. And it sounds silly for such a large company to have so many issues in that area, but we don't always get the changes we want away. We have to effectively prioritise what we've got, and quite often don't put in every single thing we'd like to. So those were 2 of the major issues. What's the optimal? It's a funny title that I've used, but effectively this is, do you really believe the change you're about to make is better than the site or the process you've got in place now. So if you make a change, 2 weeks later you can't then back it out. All of a sudden you're stuck with that change for 3 months maybe until you can roll it out in the next release that you've got. Is it actually better than what you had before? Maybe you don't find out until you've popped it live. Not particularly good, but it has happened before. So that was one of the issues that led us to speaking to Webtrends and seeing what they could actually help us with. So with those three in mind, these are the main areas that we've really benefited from. So starting with agility again, all of a sudden now we can move a lot quicker. So we can turn from a concept into a live test or a live change within 2 weeks, within a week, within 48 hours if you really wanted to, if it's a simple enough change. Whereas before we may have been waiting 3-4 months and having to plan very carefully around what changes we wanted to make. In terms of idea generation, it's nice to actually speak to other people who are have got a very good understanding of the industry. They work with not only financial institutions, they work with a number of other clients, so the knowledge base is there to tap into. So we're not talking to ourselves internally, sat around the table in the morning about what change would be best. We're talking to people who have got a bit more of a better understanding of how these changes have maybe worked elsewhere, how things have worked before for other people. So we like to think we're quite good at what we do, but equally it's nice to speak to somebody else who has a bit more knowledge on the subject. Results is probably one of the most interesting ones, because obviously you get the results, you get the answers, you get the result of what you've put live. You see what the champion test was, and it tells you exactly why it was better, and you can figure out exactly which part of it you want to pop live. But those results have been very useful to take around the business. So I can walk changes around to different parts of the business, like compliance and risk, I think I've put on there, who maybe would have challenged what I wanted to do previously, said no, a customer wouldn't want to see that, they wouldn't want to read about insurance in that way. Well, actually we're able to now prove that they don't mind it. They actually did respond quite well to that change, and here's the evidence to prove it. Some of the results of the tests that we've run have also led to other tests, and have also helped engage our senior management team a lot more than they were engaged at day one. So when we started testing, we maybe made some simple changes like copy on buttons or colours of buttons. We've now developed into much more complicated tests, but tests which have been brought to my door by people around the business that maybe wouldn't have spoken to me 12 months ago, so asking me how I can maybe help them solve their problems. So that's been great. I mean, it's made life a little bit tricky and it's made it busier, but it's very, very useful to see that happening. In terms of compare performance, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you can compare 1, 2, 3 tests and actually see real time how they're performing, see which is going to be the optimal, what you actually want to change in your site. We historically haven't done that particularly well, so we've maybe tried to do this ourselves internally and not been able to compare the performance properly, therefore have implemented the wrong solution, and as a result of that maybe haven't reaped some of the benefits that we should have. So pretty obvious what that one is. In terms of leave live the winner, so this is something that I think when we signed up with Webtrends we actually didn't realise we'd be able to do, and this is going back to the agility and the resource constraints that we have. We build a test, you've run it, you've got a winner, you know what happened, but then you can actually leave it live until you're able to take that, pass it to your internal developers and get them to build it and release it for you. So if you've got to wait 3 months for your next release slot, we can leave the test live until that time, so you're actually not going to miss out on any of the benefits while you're waiting to put that change in. So it's been very beneficial for us, really. So there were some of the challenges and some of the things that Webtrends have actually helped us with and how we've sort of received it in our business. I've got 2 slides now really to look at the results of what we did, and I'll talk through 6 tests. We'll start from left to right. So this was probably the first test we ran back 2 years ago now, and it was just simply changing the copy on buttons. You know, pretty straightforward things. We changed where it now says next at the bottom there, that previously said buy now. So this is as a customer's gone through the home insurance application process, they've got to the first point where we show a price, and they can actually interact with that price, add cover on, take cover out, and then move forwards into a purchase cycle. But what we found is we had a rather large drop-off rate there, which you'd expect, because it's the first time we've seen a price, and we probably scare a few people because we wanted to charge too much money maybe. But buy now felt a little bit harsh as a term to use, so we changed it and we tried, I think it was next, as you can see there, we tried proceed and we tried continue. And we found that next actually generated 11% more people through to the next stage in the application. So an obvious change to make, but the benefits of it and the 11% improvement in conversion was fantastic. What we didn't see was an increase in sales as a result of it, but if you think about it in terms of where it is in the site, that's midway through a 13-step process, so you've still got a number of other steps to get through. So effectively we took this result and went to the next page and then started to test on that to try and push those people a bit further down the process, with the ultimate aim of generating more sales. So that was where we started. We then moved on and started to test the journey itself. So the next two boxes there, the first visit and the returning visit, these are journey types. These are customers who have come directly to our site and they've begun their quote process with us. They start at the top, the little red dots indicate steps and pages that are displayed. So you can see there effectively we suppressed pages. So we took out certain pages for certain journeys just to see what would happen. So control on the left is the standard process. In the middle was Challenger 1, and at that point we have two pages that display a price. One is a page that just shows you what you're going to get for your money. The second page, which is called the shopper page, is where you would go if you physically wanted to alter that before you then move through to purchase. But it also shows the price. But it doesn't really upsell, or it's not as nice in terms of a marketing sense. So we thought, we'll tell you what, let's try taking the upsells out, so we'll just drop people straight onto that shopper page. And it was very similar with Challenger 2, where we took out the ancillary page at the top there, which was effectively an upsell on two ancillaries that we have, home emergency cover and pedal cycle cover or something like that. We took those hard sells out, and we found that by doing that, the third journey in the chain there actually generated more people through to sale, because effectively the price was cheaper, they had less cover in there, but it was obviously appealing to the people that were buying it, and they moved through in bigger numbers to purchase. So that was really just juggling the pages around we had, not really doing anything too fancy other than suppressing them. But we'd never been able to do that and accurately measure it. We did see a reduction in ancillaries on that test. As you can imagine, we're not giving people a hard sell, so maybe they're not picking up some of the other covers that they would do historically. They're obviously all beneficial, so I wouldn't say don't add them in if you need them, but by not advertising them as heavily, we increased sales but reduced the upsell of those ancillaries. The returning visit, very similar to the first visit effectively. These are customers who have returned back to a previously saved quote. So if you get halfway down your quote process, you can then save it, exit, and you can return at a later date by email, by coming back directly to us and typing in a few bits and pieces. What we did here was again alter the journey, so the landing point didn't feel right. We were landing all returning customers on the same page they saw when they were obtaining a quote. We had a summary page 3 steps further down the process which summarised the cover that you've got. It just felt a better place to put people, but we didn't want to just jump in and make the change, so we tested it. So half the people went straight into the standard process and see the retrieve quote page. The other half jumped straight down into the summary page, and as a result we saw 9.8 roughly % of people move through to sale in greater volume. So beneficial for us. Customers seemed to like the process, and we actually implemented that. That was the first change we then promoted to live last year. So a great result for us really. Moving on, these three, the N2 are probably the most interesting tests we've run over the last 12 months to 18 months. And the payment option ones here, this is, so when I mentioned earlier on about getting engagement of senior management, and they're now coming to me saying, what can you physically do? I've got a problem with X, can you help me with that at the front end? This was the test that really started to make that happen. So we had as I'm sure all insurers do, you put your price up maybe in year 2, 3, 4, it depends what your pricing strategy is like. We had a problem getting people to maybe stay with us into years 2, 3 and 4. We managed to do a bit of analysis on it, and we figured out that actually people who paid by a certain payment type tended to stay with us longer, because there's some benefits of doing that. So if you paid by monthly direct debit, we maybe kept you into years 2 and 3 in greater volume than we did if you paid by a credit card and paid the lump sum up front. So what we did is we were trying to effectively guide people into the monthly direct debit pot with the hope that they would purchase in the same volume, but then retain in better volumes in years 2, 3 and 4. Obviously we've not got that far down the line, so we don't know if it actually worked, but what we do know is we were able to successfully migrate people over from one payment type into another, and actually have no reduction in sales. So we weren't impacting conversion by trying to help or push people into a certain payment type. I want to point out, we wouldn't have done this if we charged direct debit fees, by the way, but we don't charge you to pay monthly, so it felt like it wasn't actually a bad thing to do. So other companies may charge you, say, 5-10% to pay monthly. We don't. So logistically made sense. And we actually deployed this to live before Christmas, and since then we've seen a 40% reduction in card payers, and it's been maintained every single week since then. So really, really positive test for us, and we've now got a lot more people in the management team coming around and saying, well, you've done that, great, what else can you do? I think I've got a meeting tomorrow with them to talk about what they can do in addition to this, which, you know, I think making my job a little harder, but, you know, it's answering all the questions they've got, which is fantastic. The middle box is marketing content, so we have spent quite a bit of time trying to optimise and fine-tune our marketing pages. So this is if you went to halifax.co.uk/insurance or lloydscsb.com/insurance, you would land in a page that looks not dissimilar to this. And effectively, it's just trying to baseline performance there, understand what people want to see, how they want us to talk to them, and how can we signpost the relevant information. So this is where everybody lands before they move into our quote process. So we've just been playing around with that really, and we've managed to increase people moving through to quote or starting a quote, which is brilliant. But we've also optimised and streamlined those pages with no obvious increase in sales, but the pages now feel a lot less cluttered and they seem to function better. We've got less bounce rates, we've reduced the bounce rates, so people appear to find the content they want quicker. The final test on the right is rebuilding pages. So this is probably, without a doubt, the most complicated test we've run to date. And effectively, this is reskinning the quote display page. So currently, if you came and got a home insurance quote from Halifax or Lloyds or Boss, it's a white labelled site, they're all identical, you would see one price. It's buildings is X, content is X, and you sort of crack on from there. We thought about it and we thought, well, actually, why don't we try and bundle up cover, display 3 or 4 different prices, and try to make it a little bit more obvious what's included in that price. So as you can see there, we've got ticks and crosses to denote what cover you get for your money. And you probably can't read it that well, but we've got option 1, 2, 3 on the right hand side. Effectively, everything's loaded in there, so it's more expensive, but you can clearly see you're getting absolutely every cover we sell. So this test, while we've not deployed it to live, we still think there's something in it and we want to work on it. It delivered some interesting results, and when I say interesting, I mean it told us things we wouldn't have thought would happen. So customers weren't starting from the cheapest price and adding cover in, they were going straight away to the most expensive item and then taking cover out to get to the point they wanted. Almost like they were starting with our premium cover and just taking out what they didn't think they needed, which we wouldn't have thought would happen. So I was fully expecting people to start at the bottom and work their way up, so I completely turned that one on its head. As you can see there, some of the numbers, we massively increased our ancillary sales as a result. Because those people were starting at the most expensive option and taking little bits out, they ended up at the net effect of that was they were buying more cover from us. One slight negative was the fact that we did sell less, so we made less sales overall, but those sales we made were more profitable. So effectively, the people were, I can't remember the exact number, I probably shouldn't quote it anyway, but we were making a lot more money for the sales that we actually shifted or made. So we've not got it live, we're still working on it because it didn't quite tick all the boxes. We've still got a few things we want to change on it, but it's in the pipeline to come back to and try to optimise it again, because we definitely feel there's something in it. But by far the most complicated test we've run, and there's not a chance we'd have been able to do this internally without the help of Webtrends, because we just would have taken too long to build it. And then if it did what it did, we'd have probably been told what you're doing and asked to take it out. So we'd never been able to do it without working with these boys. So they're all the tests I wanted to talk about. And very briefly before I wrap up, this is really what's coming next for us in terms of what we're going to do with Webtrends and how we're going to make this work. Effectively, we're going to be doing more page redesigns. We're looking to now test on tablets and various devices to understand if customers interact differently across those devices, which we fully expect they will, and we know they do. But how should we be positioning ourselves across the plethora of devices that are out there today? And we've got an iPad test live right now, I think, actually. So as I say, we're going to be looking at smartphone and tablet testing. We're also going to be putting the optimised tags into our sales centre system. So this is, if you were to phone them up and buy insurance, we're going to be optimising the system that those people on the telephone key your details into. Basically, it's a bit disjointed. It's not completely in line with the script, so they're reading something to you, but the question they're asking is three pages into that application process. So we're going to try and do some work there to try and align that, and in theory make a customer's journey over the telephone a little bit nicer as well.